Hi everyone. So here we are at the end of Season 1 of 66 Horror Flix. I want to thank all of you who've been watching the series. Your support means a whole lot. So here we are with our final episode of the season, and it's the week before Halloween, so I wanted to pick the perfect movie to go out on. Something with great music, amazing special effects, evocative cinematography, arresting performances, and at least one truly unforgettable same-sex vampire love scene. So today we're talking about the late great Tony Scott's seminal vampire thriller, The Hunger. When we talk about the contemporary incarnation of the vampire myth, obviously we talk a lot about Anne Rice's vampire cosmologies, the odd undead comedy, one very influential role-playing game, some standalone feature gems, a couple notable TV series, and of course, one young adult quadrilogy which is now thankfully faded from most of our collective memories. But very near the beginning of this latter-day renaissance of angst-ridden Nosferatu, we have this somber masterpiece of a film crafted by a novice feature director who would go on to become one of Hollywood's biggest players for 30 years. Tony Scott took Whitley Strieber's novel and created a dance of light and wind and blood that evokes everything great about 1980s music videos without ever falling into being a mere visual spectacle. In a luxurious New York townhouse, Miriam and John Blaylock, a pair of impossibly attractive vampires, bring home young victims to seduce and then kill and feed upon to sustain their immortality. John, played by none other than rock icon David Bowie, is several hundred years old, while his sire Miriam, played by Catherine Deneuve, is something closer to 6,000. But the undying lovers find that even for vampires, nothing lasts forever, as time suddenly seems to be catching up with John with alarming rapidity. He seeks out the counsel of an expert in the genetic causes of aging, Dr. Sarah Roberts, played by Susan Sarandon. But after waiting all day, John is denied a private meeting and returns home, where he quickly succumbs to the ravages of time. When Dr. Roberts seeks out his home address, she meets Miriam, and that's why we all had to watch this movie when our parents weren't around. On a serious note, the depiction of homosexuality in mainstream American cinema had thus far been overwhelmingly negative. LGBT characters were usually portrayed as derogatory stereotypes for laughs, or even when treated seriously, often tied to perversion and even criminality, such as in Cruisin' and Alfred Hitchcock's Rope. In The Hunger, we're presented with a classy seduction scene between two complex female characters that is treated respectfully, shot artfully, and this is important, is critical to the advancement of the film's plot. Look, there had been no shortage of cinematic lesbian vampire scenes shot before this film, mostly in European movies from Vampiros Lesbos to Vampire Lovers, Daughters of Darkness, and the list goes on if any of you want to do some further research on the topic. Some of these scenes are arty, most are sexy, some are pretty zany, and some are just downright raunchy. But it's difficult to argue that almost all of them don't exist, at least mostly for the sake of titillation. What this film managed to do was not only remove much of the exploitative elements from that equation, but also, intentionally or coincidentally, link together the ideas of vampirism, casual sexual encounters, and sexually transmitted diseases, which was definitely a topic of growing concern in the early 1980s. Horror and science fiction are at their mightiest when they operate as allegories, reflecting the issues and struggles we as humans deal with in our everyday lives. From Herman and Lily Munster being one of the first TV couples to share a single bed, to Kirk and Ahura exchanging the first biracial kiss on television. Genre storytelling has been able to be a catalyst for social progress because it can present otherwise controversial topics couched in the safety of fantastical characters or situations. And that's just what The Hunger did by depicting love as a connection between individuals that exists apart from gender. The film's stylistic influences are so omnipresent that they're almost difficult to quantify now. From skyrocketing the awareness of darkwave band Bauhaus to rooting the vampire myth in Egypt and of course the visual concept of the Ankh totem, The Hunger not only had a hand in catalyzing goth culture worldwide, but it's also had a seismic influence on the literature, art, and film of the vampire subgenre and subculture. The Hunger presents a unique concept of vampires, separating them from the classic European myth of the walking corpse, and depicts them as a separate race which split from mankind in the distant past, a kind of subspecies, and that's something that's been adopted in many other vampire iterations since. This is also the first presentation I remember seeing of the vampire as a kind of serial killer, amassing a horde of victims, and that's one more concept that has sprouted an untold amount of tributes and imitations. Finally, you can't talk about The Hunger without mentioning that the combination of Dick Smith's makeup and David Bowie's performance as the rapidly decaying vampire has never really been matched with practical or digital effects since. It remains one of the great cinematic testaments to what excellence in makeup, camera, lighting, and performance can achieve together. That's all I got. We've reached the end of this episode and this season. I want to thank you all again for watching 66 Horror Flix. We'll see you in 2018.
Undead, 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 the virginal brides file past his tomb, still many times their flowers bereft in deathly bloom. Alone in a darkened room. The Count. Bela Lugos is dead.